right, so you ready to jump into this deep dive today? We're tackling Stop the Leftist Wrecking Ball, written by Conrad Riker.
Yeah, this one seems right up your alley, all that covert contract stuff and digging into how, like, institutions got to where they are.
Oh, absolutely. And Riker, well, he doesn't hold back, calls this book straight up a rallying cry for, well, I guess you could say anyone who feels like those conservative values, they're under attack.
From what I've skimmed, he's got some pretty strong opinions, that's for sure.
24 chapters, man. We're talking cultural Marxism, feminism, how families are structured, globalism, the whole 9 yards. Should be interesting to unpack all that.
Well, and what's kind of cool is that Riker, he doesn't just, like, point fingers. He tries to lay out a path, you know? Like, wants readers to feel like they can actually push back.
Okay, so where does he even start with all this? Like, what's the core of his argument?
Well, he puts cultural Marxism as, like, public enemy number one, thinks it's the root of a lot of the problems, and he traces it all the way back to the Frankfurt School.
Oh, okay, yeah. Those academics from back in the 20s and 30s, right?
Yeah, but Riker, he goes deeper. Claims those ideas, they've, like, seeped into everything. Universities, the media, even our entertainment.
Oh, wow. So it's not just some, like, dusty old academic theory. It's, like, actively shaping culture now.
That's what he's saying. And he names names, too, like Herbert Marcuse, for example.
Okay, I vaguely remember him. Wasn't he all about that repressive tolerance concept?
Bingo! Riker says that's exactly what's being used to silence people today. You know, like, tolerance is only for the folks who agree with the in ideology, which obviously Riker sees as a huge problem.
I could see how that would tie into the whole cancel culture debate that's been going on.
Oh, totally. Riker even brings up things like, rape culture and the push for, like, super progressive sex education in schools. Says that's all part of this agenda.
So wait, he's saying this isn't just some intellectual argument happening in classrooms, it's like a full-on assault.
Pretty much. He's saying traditional values are under attack. And this is where it gets really interesting, because then Riker ties it all into the whole war on men concept.
Whoa, okay. How's that fit in?
He sees feminism as, like, the main weapon being used. And he argues that it's led to, like, this crisis of masculinity.
A crisis? Like, how so?
He claims men are being disempowered, you know, systematically.
So are we talking like real-world examples here or just theory?
Oh, he gets specific, uses things like, remember that Gillette ad? The one that, like, criticized toxic masculinity and the Me Too movement?
Yeah, those were big.
Riker says those are just symptoms of this bigger trend, where men are constantly being demonized and their traditional roles are being, like, chipped away at.
Okay, I mean, those are definitely hot-button topics.
Yeah.
But is he saying there's a deliberate effort behind all of it?
He seems to think so. And he even says things like family courts, they're biased against men, and that the education system, it's failing boys.
I can see how that would be a touchy subject for a lot of people. Like he's saying the modern male experience is kind of bleak.
Yeah, he definitely doesn't sugarcoat it. And speaking of families, well, that's another big part of his argument. He really hammers on the importance of the traditional nuclear family, mom, dad, kids.
Classic setup. Like the Leave It to Beaver kind of thing. But what's he saying? That's under attack too.
Oh, totally. He says stuff like single parenthood, alternative lifestyles, even, like, government policies. They're all chipping away at it.
So it's not just like societal shifts. He's saying there are actual forces working against that family structure.
Yeah, and he brings up the stats, too, like the decline in the number of nuclear families and what he claims are the consequences from that.
Okay, so it's not just an opinion. He's got data to back it up.
He tries to. And, you know, he even circles it back to feminism again. Says that women focusing on their careers has played a part in this whole decline.
So he's building this narrative of a society that's kind of in crisis.
You could say that. And then this all leads into what Riker wants people to do about it. Like,
Right.
He's not just complaining, he's got solutions.
Okay, so what's the plan? What does he want people to do to fight back against all these threats?
He says we got to actively defend those traditional values. And he's talking a wide range of things, like promoting conservative theology, resisting globalism.
Okay, so pretty big picture stuff.
Yeah.
Anything more specific?
Oh, yeah. He's all about advocating for free speech, pushing back against what he calls radical sex education. It's like, here's what we need to do to turn things around.
Okay, but before we get swept up in all this, I gotta ask, what about the other side of this story? Like, have we looked at other perspectives? What does the research say beyond what's just in this book?
You're right. We always got to challenge those assumptions, dig a little deeper.
Yeah, bring it over.
We can't just take his word for it. Got to do our due diligence.
Right. Always got to keep that critical lens on. So what else does Riker dive into? We've only scratched the surface here.
Oh, there's a ton more. Like I said, the book is dense. He gets into multiculturalism, free speech, even how he thinks religion's been like corrupted by progressive ideas.
Whoa, okay. Let's break those down one by one. First up, multiculturalism. What's his beef with that?
Well, he's saying the way it's being done now, it's actually like eroding our cultural heritage. And he's not just talking about immigration, it's deeper than that. Like, he thinks the whole idea that all cultures are equally valid, that's a threat to Western civilization.
Okay, that's a pretty bold statement. So is he saying some cultures are just like straight up better than others?
He doesn't say it that bluntly, but that's kind of the implication. He thinks this mindset, this like hyper tolerance that leads to people being afraid to speak out, like they'll get shut down if they criticize another culture, uses that whole Danish cartoon controversy as an example.
Oh, yeah, right. Where those cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad caused all that outrage.
Exactly. Riker's point is that the fear of offending, well, it led to self-censorship. Like, people were so worried about backlash who just kept quiet, which, in his view, is a huge problem for free speech.
So he's saying we're so focused on not offending anyone that we're losing our ability to have honest conversations.
Pretty much. And he brings up that James Damore Google memo, too. The guy who got fired for writing about gender differences.
Vaguely, yeah. Wasn't that a whole thing a few years back?
Big time. Riker's point is that Damore got punished just for expressing his opinion. And he says that's part of this pattern, like any challenge to the progressive narrative, bam, you get shut down.
Okay, I see where he's going with this. It's like he's saying that reason and logic are taking a back seat to feelings.
Exactly. He calls it an assault on reason and truth. Thinks we're living in a time where feelings and opinions are way more important than facts.
So, how does he explain how we got to this point?
He blames it on what he calls the feminization of education. Argues that schools aren't focused on teaching kids how to think critically anymore, or how to evaluate evidence objectively.
So instead of focusing on like hard facts and stuff, it's more about feelings and social issues.
That's what he's saying. He's pretty harsh on modern education, actually. Claims schools care more about promoting social justice and self-esteem than actual academics. Even says boys are getting the short end of the stick because the system caters too much to girls.
Oh, wow. That's a pretty big statement. So he's going beyond just like curriculum choices. He's talking about like a fundamental shift in the whole system.
Yeah, he goes pretty far. Says schools are basically indoctrinating kids with a leftist worldview. Brings up examples of what he calls anti-American teachings and the pushing of woke ideology.
Okay, so this is getting pretty heavy. He's making some serious accusations here.
He definitely doesn't hold back. And then he ties it all back to this idea of a deliberate effort to undermine traditional gender roles, which goes back to that whole war on masculinity thing we talked about.
Right. So he's saying it's not just about like individual attitudes, it's like a coordinated attack.
That's how he sees it. Claims men are being told to suppress their natural instincts and that being traditionally masculine is now a bad thing. He uses all sorts of examples, like remember the push for gender-neutral language and how transgender identities are becoming more accepted. He sees that as evidence of this trend.
So wait, is he saying there's something wrong with being transgender?
Not explicitly, but he seems to think it's all part of this bigger effort to blur the lines between genders. And of course, he brings it back to the decline of the nuclear family. Says all this is contributing to the breakdown of that traditional unit.
Okay, so it's all connected in his mind. All these different threads, they're all part of the same tapestry.
Exactly. And the big picture he's painting is that leftist ideologies, they're like termites, eating away at the foundations of Western civilization.
Whoa, okay, that's a pretty dramatic image. So is he saying we're headed for like a total collapse?
He thinks we're at a crossroads, yeah. Like we have to choose. Do we want to preserve our traditional values, or do we let this leftist wrecking ball keep swinging?
Okay, so he's definitely trying to sound the alarm here. But is he just doom and gloom, or does he offer any hope?
Oh, he's definitely got a plan of attack. Wants his readers to get fired up, to resist these trends, defend their values, fight back against what he sees as like an existential threat.
So what does he propose? What are we supposed to do about all this?
He's got a whole roadmap, actually. Outlines specific steps individuals and communities can take. Things like getting involved in politics, supporting organizations that align with his views, raising kids with traditional values.
So it's not just about reading the book, it's about taking action.
He wants people to get out there and make a difference, yeah. But before we get too carried away, I think it's important to remember that this book is super controversial. Like, Riker's views are definitely on the far right, and he's not afraid to use some pretty strong language and make some big generalizations.
Yeah, that's a fair point. We got to acknowledge that this isn't exactly a neutral perspective.
Right. It's one thing to make an argument, but it's another to do it in a way that's respectful, like
Yeah.
with nuance and actual evidence. Riker definitely leans into being provocative, which can be good and bad.
So on one hand, he's grabbing attention, getting people talking.
Yeah, and folks who already agree with him, they'll probably eat it up.
But on the other hand, he could be alienating people who might actually be open to some of his ideas, but they're turned off by the way he's saying it.
Exactly. It's not exactly inviting dialogue or like wanting to understand other viewpoints, so it's tricky.
So where does that leave us? What are we supposed to take away from all this?
That's the million-dollar question. And honestly, it's up to you. We've tried to give you a fair summary of what Riker's saying, but we also want you to think for yourself.
Right. This is just one perspective, one voice in a much bigger conversation.
Exactly. There are other perspectives out there, other voices that need to be heard. So if you're interested in this stuff, keep digging. Read other books and articles, talk to people who have different views, challenge your own assumptions.
Love that. That's what critical thinking is all about. Being willing to engage with ideas you might not agree with, to consider different perspectives.
Exactly. So let's shift gears a bit. Riker spends a lot of time talking about this war on men he sees happening, says feminism has gone too far and is actually harming men now.
Okay, so what's his evidence for that?
Well, he frames it like it's a zero-sum game, Like any gains for women automatically mean losses for men.
So, in his mind, it's impossible for both men and women to progress at the same time.
That's how he sees it. He paints this picture of a society where men are constantly being demonized, made to feel less masculine, unfairly targeted, talks about things like false rape accusations, the bias against men in family court, how men are often portrayed as the bad guys in movies and stuff.
Okay. I mean, those are definitely serious issues. But is he saying they're happening all the time or just in specific cases?
It's tricky. He acknowledges that men face legitimate problems, like the lack of support for male victims of domestic violence and sexual assault, and that, sometimes guys get falsely accused.
Right. I mean, those are real problems.
Exactly. But Riker's suggesting these aren't just isolated incidents. He thinks they're part of this bigger systemic problem, like it's built into the system to work against men.
So it's not just bad luck or individual bad actors. He's saying it's intentional.
That's the vibe I'm getting. He's arguing there's this deliberate, coordinated effort to undermine men, to make masculinity seem toxic. And he thinks it's having a really bad impact on society.
Wow. Okay, so what's the end game in his mind? What's the goal of all this?
He even goes so far as to say there's a feminist conspiracy to destroy the traditional family and replace it with a society run by women.
Whoa, hold on. A conspiracy? Is he talking about like a secret cabal of feminists plotting in the shadows?
He doesn't quite say that, but it's kind of the impression he gives.
Okay, that's a pretty big claim to make. Does he actually offer any evidence to back that up? Like, is he citing credible sources, research, anything concrete?
That's a good question, and it's something we got to keep in mind as we go through this, because the strength of any argument, it hinges on the evidence, right?
Absolutely. We got to be critical readers here. Always evaluate that evidence, see if there are other interpretations he might be missing, and whether his claims actually hold up.
Totally agree. Now, another big theme he keeps coming back to is this critique of multiculturalism. Says it's destroying our cultural heritage, dividing society, making us less united.
Okay. So is he just straight up against diversity?
It's more nuanced than that. He frames multiculturalism as this attack on Western civilization. Like, it's not just a natural thing happening, it's deliberate.
So he's not just talking about demographics or globalization. He's saying there's an agenda behind it.
Yeah, he paints this picture of a society that's being overrun by foreign cultures, where traditional values are being tossed aside and people are losing their sense of national identity.
That's a pretty bleak outlook. Does he acknowledge any of the positive aspects of multiculturalism at all, like the enriching of culture, the benefits of diversity, the learning that can happen when different cultures interact?
That's a great point, and it's something we need to keep in mind as we dig deeper, because there are multiple perspectives on this, right? Riker's is just one.
Right. It's not as simple as multiculturalism good or multiculturalism bad. There's a lot of gray area there.
Exactly. Okay, so one thing Riker's especially critical of is mass immigration. Says it's leading to less social cohesion, putting a strain on resources, and even causing more crime.
Those are some pretty heavy accusations.
Yeah.
But are they accurate? Like, what does the actual data say?
Well, those are claims you often hear from groups that are against immigration. But a lot of studies have actually shown the opposite. Like, Immigrants, both legal and undocumented, they contribute a lot to the economy, and they're actually less likely to commit crimes than people born here.
Interesting. So is he just ignoring that evidence, or does he address it somehow?
He seems more focused on the cultural impacts of immigration. Says it's diluting Western values and making us lose our national identity.
Okay, but what does he even mean by Western values and national identity? Like, those are pretty loaded terms. Does he ever define them clearly?
That's a great question. And does he even acknowledge that Western societies have always been diverse? Like, there's never been just one monolithic culture.
Right, right. It's important to remember that. We're not starting from a blank slate here.
Exactly. So, to really understand his argument, we got to figure out what he means by those terms, because the strength of his argument really depends on how clearly he defines those things and whether those definitions actually hold up under scrutiny.
Makes sense. So moving on, what else does he tackle?
Well, he has a whole section on globalism, says it's a threat to our country's sovereignty, our economy, and our traditional values.
Okay, so what's his issue with globalism? Is he just against cooperation between countries?
It's more than that. It's interesting. He often uses globalism and socialism interchangeably. Like, he thinks they're basically the same thing.
So he's tying it to a specific political ideology.
Yeah, he's painting this picture of a world where unelected bureaucrats and these global elites are calling the shots. Says they're eroding national borders and ignoring what the people want.
Okay, so he's tapping into that whole fear of losing control, of being dictated to by forces outside our own country.
Exactly. But the question is, does he acknowledge any of the good things about international cooperation and trade? Or does he just see it as this purely evil force?
Yeah, there are definitely two sides to that coin. We got to look at both.
Absolutely. And as critical thinkers, it's our job to weigh the evidence, consider all the different angles, and form our own conclusions.
Couldn't agree more. So what specific aspects of globalism does he criticize?
He's particularly harsh on organizations like the United Nations and the World Trade Organization.
Those are pretty big targets. What's his problem with them?
He says they're chipping away at our national sovereignty and pushing this globalist agenda on the world.
So he sees them as like a threat to individual nations.
Yeah, but it's important to remember those organizations were created by sovereign nations, to help tackle shared problems and work together. Riker's making them sound like these shadowy, all-powerful groups that just impose their will on everyone, which isn't really accurate.
Right. It's always good to remember the context, how these things actually came about.
Totally. He also rails against free trade agreements, says they're causing job losses and hurting manufacturing in developed countries.
That's a big talking point, especially in certain political circles. But is it the whole story?
Good question. Does he even acknowledge the benefits of free trade? Like how it can lead to lower prices for consumers and make economies more efficient? Those are things to think about.
All right, got to look at the whole picture, not just focus on the downsides.
Yeah.
So does Riker offer any solutions? Like, what does HE think we should do about these job losses?
Well, that's the thing. He's really good at pointing out what he sees as problems. But when it comes to solutions, it gets a little vague. Like, he doesn't really get into specifics about alternative trade policies or anything.
Okay, so more about raising awareness than concrete plans.
Pretty much. Which, hey, awareness is important too. But yeah, it'd be interesting to hear him flesh out those solutions more.
Makes sense. So moving on, what about this whole political correctness thing? Riker talks a lot about that, right?
Oh yeah, big time. He's basically saying it's killing free speech. Like, it's created this environment where people are terrified to say what they really think, for fear of offending someone.
So like the whole cancel culture phenomenon.
Exactly. He uses some pretty intense examples, like people losing their jobs or getting ostracized from their communities just for expressing opinions that are considered offensive. He sees it as a way to control people, to silence anyone who disagrees with the mainstream narrative.
So it's not just about being polite, it's about suppressing dissent.
That's his argument. He even talks about universities becoming these echo chambers where only one viewpoint is allowed, calls it the closing of the American mind, and sees it as a huge threat to freedom of thought.
Wow. Okay, so he's saying we're losing our ability to think critically, to challenge ideas.
Pretty much. And of course, he ties it back to his whole cultural Marxism thing. Says political correctness is a tool to enforce conformity and crush any opposition.
So it's all connected in his mind. This big web of forces working against individual freedom.
Exactly. It's like he's saying we're living in this society where everyone's walking on eggshells, afraid to say the wrong thing. It's a pretty scary picture, honestly.
Yeah, I can see how that would be concerning.
Mm-hmm.
So how does this tie into his views on identity politics?
That's a big part of it. He thinks identity politics is dividing us, separating us into these little groups based on race, gender, sexuality. And he blames it for creating this culture of victimhood and resentment.
So instead of focusing on what unites us, we're highlighting our differences.
That's what he's saying. He's really critical of what he calls the grievance industry. Those groups and individuals who he thinks profit off of keeping people angry and divided.
Okay. So he's saying there are people who actually benefit from stoking those divisions.
That's his argument. He says they encourage people to see themselves as victims, to blame others for their problems. And he thinks it's incredibly destructive. He even calls identity politics a form of cultural suicide.
Whoa, that's a pretty extreme statement. What does he mean by that?
He thinks it's weakening us from the inside out, making us more vulnerable to threats from outside. Like we're so busy fighting amongst ourselves that we're not paying attention to the bigger picture.
Okay, so it's not just about political disagreements. He sees it as a threat to our very survival.
He's definitely framing it that way. It's a pretty dire warning. Makes you think about the role that identity plays in our society, for sure. Like, are we too focused on our differences? Are we losing sight of the things that bring us together?
Those are some big questions to ponder. Whether you agree with Riker or not, he's definitely raising some important points. It's a call to action, to really examine what's going on in our society and how we can move forward.
Exactly. And that's what this whole deep dive has been about. We haven't just summarized Riker's book, we've tried to break it down, look at it from different angles, and encourage you to think for yourself.
Right. We've given you a taste of what Stop the Leftist Wrecking Ball is all about, but there's so much more to explore. He covers a lot of ground: religion, education, immigration, globalism. He's got a very specific and sometimes pretty controversial take on these issues.
For sure. But love him or hate him, he's definitely going to make you think. He challenges the status quo, and I guarantee this book will spark some lively discussions.
No doubt about that. So if you're looking for a book that'll make you question your assumptions, challenge your worldview, Stop the Leftist Wrecking Ball is worth checking out.
You can find it on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books.
But remember, go in with a critical eye, do your own research, and form your own opinions.
That's what we're all about here on The Deep Dive, helping you become a more informed, more engaged thinker.
Exactly. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone, and we'll see you next time.